Good afternoon. Today is June 29th, and we have another episode of Politica Show Online's Wire. And our permanent political analyst is Ilya Levkov. Ilya, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me once again. I hope there's no revolutions, no change among our viewers and listeners.
Not yet, not yet,
Not
but there
yet.
might be one. There might be one, perhaps in Iran somewhere. Maybe you can comment
Okay,
on that.
let's start the Megillah.
Yes, you're in the driver's seat.
I'm in the driver's seat. Okay, last time I spoke about an item that nobody mentioned, and this is the problems of flying of Americans B-2 to drop their bombs. On three places in Iran. Now I would like to talk about the second one before I expand to other issues. And the second one is that Trump declared loud and clear, I don't want any regime change. Now, why did he say such thing? After all, he is not a historian, but he knows that if you have a big war, you have to not only to defeat the army, but to defeat the people who commanded this army. This was rather obvious. As a matter of fact, I'll give you some other samples. Regime change that took place, and two of them were in Iran. In 1953, as you know, a liberal kind of a socialist, if not a communist, Mossadegh, was turned. That was a putsch, a local putsch staged by MI6 and CIA, where they toppled this prime minister. There was no war, but still they didn't like what he was doing. What was he doing? He wanted to nationalize the oil of Iran and let the government command and control it. Who didn't like it? Primarily Great Britain, because they discovered oil there. They developed it from the early 20s, 1920s, and now in the 30 years thereafter, that socialist prime minister who was elected, yes, but he wanted to do something very, very drastic. To this, a population didn't want. There were only promises how beautiful their life will be thereafter when the government will control the oil. And therefore, as I said, the MI6 and CIA staged a small, practically bloodless coup. He was toppled, and then the father of the in 53 was still the father. I want to make sure the father of the Shah or the Shah itself. I think Shah came to the throne somewhere in 1955-56. My memory, but it's not of high importance. The main thing is that indeed the successful and practically bloodless coup took part in Iran in 1956. So why was it that is? And therefore, there was no at the end of the war. Though during the World War II, as you know, there was also a conference in November 1943 where the three parties, United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union leaders such as Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin had a conference talking about what will be the consequences of the future. They even with a map where they divided the political influence of the states to what degree. There is even a map where Poland was not included. It was a question mark. Greece, the entire map in a way was kind of a raw draft. What will be the future of states and their boundaries after World War II? However, listen, nobody questioned, none of them were questioned so what should be done with Nazi Germany. It was a decision before, no compromising, fight until the total victory. So there was also a military operation with the end of regime change. You cannot change, conquer Germany, and then let Hitler remain in power, correct? The same thing was in Japan. You cannot allow dropping the atomic bomb, killing, surrender, and then leaving everything as it was before. No, therefore was a constitution. The Americans in Japan drafted a constitution. It's a very interesting process. I don't want to go into this. I just let you know that among the drafters was a lawyer, a Jewish woman who really took a care primarily on the future women's right in Japan. Just to show you this kind of a minute. The Japanese said, yes, we surrender totally, but with one condition. You do not touch our emperor, because our emperor in a way is a continuation, it's a spine of our nation. And indeed, they left him there, not in the controlling position. So at least from outside, there was no drastic change, but inner relationship, government control, democracy, and disarmament. Both countries, by the way, there were disarmament of Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. So this word became normal. It was a normal conclusion. You conquer, you stay there, you don't absorb the territory, but you at least demand that there will be no repeating aggressive policy of those states. Now, so how did we come to this point that that regime change is a bad notion? Now we'll step there, political in general or specifically, and later on the position why Trump says, I don't want to change, to have regime change, because he stipulated it causes chaos. You know what's interesting, and he does know it, said the chaos was a very, very negative word. But you know for whom? It was for totalitarian regime in general. They could not stomach chaos and freedom. What's a chaos? Chaos is a freedom where the population decides who will be the prime minister of that country. But this was too much. Especially the young Soviet communists, Lenin and Stalin later on, this was the most negative word for them. Chaos. Chaos cannot be when there is a control by the communists. The plan, the history, the involvement, etc., etc. There is just giving you a brush, white brush. It says everything when there will be a future, bright future of the proletariat. Till then, it will be evolving. It's called dictatorship of the proletariat will be evolving to the bright future, and then at the end there will be no states at all. Why? Because state is actually a system at which it controls the population, and because the population have to be controlled, because minorities, that is the workers, were not controlling the situation. But the moment it becomes so-called communist, pure communist, so-called, and then there will be no place for the law itself because the governing by law, that is, majority governing by law was considered uh, negative in the Soviet system. And I don't want to go into Mussolini and Nazi Germany, etc. But the point is that, that this was the regime change. Now, when the regime change became a negative word, primarily when it was coupled together with the nation building. I'm giving you just, stops, bullets to understand the development of this concept. When it became a regime change, like in Iraq, what would happen? It was became a nation building because Iraq was not a real nation, though it had history behind it. Like Syria, Lebanon not, but it was a South Syrian claim it was southern Syria. But to make it short, that is. Um, this was primarily, as I told you, this Iraq, and then of course there was the liberation of Kuwait, and of course the remnants of uh, Vietnam, which was also clearly regime change. This is the same country, just the northern communist regime wanted to control the entire country. So it was put aside, it was allowed to happen. We know all the consequences. And by the way, I had last year kind of somebody called me from Vietnam, a printer. He said, "Why don't you print with us?" And it was massive. I forgot. She was very young. 24, 25. In any case, for me, it was a chance to ask her thousands of questions, education, for my education, not just reading, for other things, playing. So, what we have at the end, there was this negative concept, nation building and regime change. It became a taboo word in American political lexicon. And therefore, nowadays, we have an interesting situation. We have Iran, which was never conquered only once, I think, by Alexander the Great, because you have to study the geography. It's unbelievable. It's actually, you have mountains all around. Uh, then you have two on the east side. You have two huge deserts, and very slice area is livable. And what's interesting is that the area next to the sea, to the Caspian Sea, and on the west side to the bay, the Persian, not bay, it's called. So in any case, there are no people living at the edge of water. So this is what I want to tell you. On the Caspian Sea, because you have no space in a way, it's a huge mountain which embraces the Caspian Sea and only several meters, so I don't know, 50 meters at most. You have a place to enjoy and swim and things like that. So there is no, people don't live, like in the United States, you have a vision of the sea, it's a great credit. And to allow it, this what happened in Florida, where they made it possible for numerous people to live in an apartment and have a view of the ocean. Okay, so what happened in this particular case that Iran could not be conquered, and nobody conquered it. However, they called themselves victorious always. That is, no, that nobody wanted to go because it's a huge territory. It's a huge territory, and they were much more developed than the Arab states. Their civilization has deep, deep, deep roots. And as a matter of fact, even the language, their language is much more no throat, deep throat, consonants. It's much more softer and different from the Arabic language. Uh, but they call themselves indeed unconquerable. But it's true, but nobody tried to. So, but this concept was for the first time shaken to the core because Iran's policy, for some reason, and I can tell you the specific reason, only one number. If I have a chance to talk about oil and the impact of oil, in 2000, total budget of Iran of selling oil was 110 billion. 20 years later, it was fourfold. 400% growth. They became $640 billion revenue from oil. Now, the oil also, in this particular case, was blood, and therefore Iran changed its position, and not instead of fighting direct with their enemies, that they decided it's United States and Israel. Israel had not a notion. Vice versa, there are books about even in the Jewish Bible, in the Old Testament, it's also the original Bible. There are plenty things about the as Persian conquered Palestine and then even exiled them to Persia and then allowed the professional builders and chisels of stones, go back to Jerusalem and to build the new temple. So in a way, between Israel and Iran, there are some historical positive aspect even during the positive action with after being conquered even by Iran, and then they released the Jews. So that was some kind of mellow, much control. It was geographical control. They had no challenging the Bible, or they had no also at that point and on the eve. It was before BC, so before Christ times, there were no Arabs. They were different civilization. What happened now, as I mentioned, that is they became rich and soaked in money, in oil and money. And one of the topics to analyze in political science is, yes, we have the their intention, the known, but do they have the capabilities to implement it? And this is always this intersection of intentions and capabilities. So now, how did it come that they became radical enemies of the United States? After all, United States did not create a havoc in Iran, but it was already on the religious level, as Ayatollah, who returned back from France to Iran, and he really saturated the political culture with hate toward foreigners and designated United States as a big devil and Israel as a small devil. And that's what happened at this point, uh, 45 years ago, in a way, said Iran went to a different aggressive path, which is explainable only by their shaky situation in the Islamic world. Why is that? Because they are Shiites, and Shiites are a very small minority of the Islamic world, i.e., the only 15%, the rest, the rest 85% are Sunnis. You understand? So they had to become either suspicious of Sunnis or try to dominate them or to conquer the holy places. And they simply went on a completely different path of external aggression. Their external aggression was unique because they didn't want to fight themselves, and therefore they created this belt,
Proxy.
the aggressive belt against Israel. Those are Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Hezbollah, Hamas, and Yemen. This what happened, and this was growing up to the point when the Arab states became fearful. They were fearful. You see, Israel has a bomb some 50, 60 years. For 60 years, nobody trembles in the Middle East that one sunny day Israel will attack them with an atomic weapon. But they decided to go their own way and introduce this uh, nuclear nuclear atomic bomb. And that shook everybody because we have a conference, we have a 1968 non-proliferation treaty. I don't want to go into all that complicated issues. The main thing is that that what became the moved Israel and the United States. And this is for the first time in history that there's such alliance. There were alliances between United States and Britain, with the United States and France on the eve of the birth of the nation, as you know. And also France bought Louisiana, as you know, because they needed money for their wars in 1812, and the United States appreciated and bought it. There was some organic relationship. But here we have, for the first time, if we look at the history of modern history of the world, it's the first time you have a huge country of the United States and a tiny smear on the map of a country that now how many Jews are there? 9, 10 million, and additional 2.5 Arabs and Druzes, etc. It's a tiny, usually such no country of that size is active in the world affairs with such activity, and in addition to this has a kind of a friendship, deep friendship and cooperation between the United States and Israel. So therefore, it was a jump to the Israelis to the level of being not just regional power, but super regional. Yeah, I wouldn't have said, global. Israel is not a global power. But many parameters, Israel supersedes many countries which are the members of Western Europe and other countries, Brazil and Argentina even. So we have here now a new phenomenon that Israel became a partner, an even partner. And this is not a simple issue. That is, in this particular very asymmetrical marriage, the United States have their own goals. In a tiny country, even the ally has their own goals, which cannot be compatible because they are different categories. Therefore, this cooperation requires a certain so-called hidden agenda and agreement between Israel and the United States. And therefore, things that he had to do, that suddenly Trump said, by the way, the Israelis began to plan this operation before the election of Trump, but when Trump was elected, it was given a full speed ahead. So the operation of to subdue Iran and take away from it its nuclear weapons, or which were forthcoming, uh, it was an Israeli initiative embraced by Trump. But Trump could not, because he said, I don't want wars. I don't want people killed. So luckily, in this particular cooperation, we cannot say that many people were killed. On a normal peaceful day in Ukraine, at least 1,000 people together from both sides are being killed. There only during this 12 days or 12 days war, around 500 of Iranians were killed because mostly of them were living in the uh, Tehran and suburban area Tehran or two other cities. So therefore, it's a very, very minimal. On the Israeli side, as you know, the total victims of this were from the rockets were 26 or 29, 29, I believe. So we are now at the situation where we have those two countries. Um, and Trump didn't want to say that he is a full partner and he agrees with everything. No, he said, for the sake of peace, just give up your uh, nuclear weapons. They didn't do it, therefore, nuclear weapons were destroyed. Now, at this point became something which is not always clear. Trump said, scolded Israel, you have to stop it. We have a ceasefire line, and it was still within ceasefire, pre-ceasefire beginning. Iranians shot several rockets uh, against Israel, and Israel replied, and Trump said, scandal, what are you doing? In any case, he understood that Iran had to save its face and Israel had to save its face. You cannot Israel, if there's already a ceasefire and Iran shoots Israel and Israel doesn't respond, it's unacceptable, you understand? There would have to be a point that nobody ceasefire is a ceasefire. So I was in between kind of a hidden scandal where Trump scolded Israel and called even the Israeli planes back. He told them, turn your military fighters back, and Israel complied. So, but there was in it kind of a clear, understandable agreement and something extra. The something extra primarily dwells into this fairy tale that it's a prime time to give Trump the Nobel Prize for Peace. You understand? It's kind of in the air. Sure, it was injected by him, and therefore it also tied his hands. Let's say he said, "Don't kill the Ayatollah." He gave Israel. Israel neutralizes being used. 30 generals. Never in such period the 30 generals were killed. I don't know how many Nazi generals were killed during this 4 years of war. And here during 22 days, over 30. Another important and element is that Israel, for the first time, not just used the Mossad, the intelligence services, but there also was a military brigade, Brigade 89, that was smuggled into Iran, that received various components of drones, that they really became invisible army within Iran that were able to guide drones into particular window. It's much easier because the Israeli Air Force prefers to do their work at night, you know. Yes, but at night to find a particular window in a huge city, it's not so easy. Therefore, the way Israelis establish this system, which is akin to the Ukrainian, but they were simply prepared it parallel secretly. Ukrainians did, and the same idea struck Israelis before it was utilized. You understand? So
So,
we,
Ilya, sorry,
yeah.
question. We know that there were some boots on the ground, right? Israeli special
Yes,
forces,
this what I told you that, but not Americans, only
not
Israelis.
American. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
understood.
the
Um,
brigade, 89, 89's brigade. Yes,
that's special forces of
yes,
Amman,
yeah, of the IDF.
IDF. Yes.
Yes.
Um, do you know if there were um any of them lost or captured? There was nothing in the news.
Well, we do know it's there were, as I told you, 30 generals and scientists and etc. 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 We know what these forces did within Iran, but uh, we it's not everybody is being counted, and it's not necessary, you see. But as I mentioned before, at the same time, when Trump realized the possibilities of Israel, he understood that he has to curtail for the sake of appeasement, external appeasement, because he cannot hunt and kill this Ayatollah in his bunker, and at the same time uh, uh, expecting to receive a Nobel Prize for peace. You understand? So there was a subtleties in it. But once again, to summarize the entire thing, which I have much more, I will maybe have one. I have a full chapter about oil, but we will not go into this. But about the Israeli side. And now what is very interesting interview is a veteran of Israeli politics of Oleg, or he's not such a late, he's about 40 years in Israel, Zeev Elkin, and he gave an interview about the inside of the Israeli government, how it votes, etc. Let's say he said when the airplanes were in the air, he called the head of the Israeli opposition, Yair Lapid, and informed him, said, the conflict begins now. And asked him not to, it was a matter of hours, but in any case, he didn't leak it. And it was quite responsible. But Netanyahu had to do it because in the normal democracy, you don't do behind you can prepare everything without informing the opposition, and therefore there were plenty of leakage in Israel. But in general, you do inform when the nation goes to war. So in the last minute, you inform the opposition saying we are at war. uh, the other things that I wanted to say that so yeah, two things. Maybe before I touch Israel, the text, the love letter, the song "Love Letters" in the sense. Well, this kind of love letters in politics. Trump's letter where he glorifies uh, Bibi Netanyahu on the Twitter. It's unbelievable, and there was never such a thing. Uh, Again, in international politics, and free in a free world, it's not, let's say, the East European communist state congratulated Stalin on his birthday or whatever. But here you have, he was flabbergasted on the issue, said it was close to him, said during this uh, planning endless details about the war, forthcoming war, he had to sit hours upon hours and give a testimony in a trial, in a silly trial. There are three, I think there were four, one fell through already. The other ones also, the chief justices demand to lower their accusation from the prosecutor general. And but this one is, so their numbers is 1,000, 3,000, and 4,000. The 1,000 was a friend, Milchin, who became lived in lived in the United States, but he is a citizen of England. He wrote books, made numerous movies in Hollywood, and he was coming. They're very, very bad, old friends and buddies. So what was he doing? He gave to the son, when the son of Netanyahu was a baby. He gave him some Mickey Mouse or something of that type, and also provided him with cigars when he would come, and champagne. And about this, it happened 10 years, 12 years ago. And about this, during the war, during the entire thing, it debates, was it a bribe, was not a bribe, what was given as a value to this Milchin, etc., etc. It's unbelievable, and he is a very old man. He testified in the court in Britain via direct TV and all those things. In any case, so here we have, so finally it's kind of a dawned upon Trump of the entire issue, of crimes of Bibi Netanyahu, and he wrote those 2 pages. Well, you can read it. And our viewers can find it on Twitter. You don't have to listen to my accentuated reading of Trump's. But he was unbelievable. But on the other hand, he, like nobody other, feels his pain, Bibi's pain, because he was traumatized in this court, if you remember, and was found even guilty. So the final things which I want to say, I was talking about leaks, and this is the issue of leaks. Zev Elkin was an interesting interview in Hebrew on one of the not channels, it even was like a podcast. In any case, he said, he said, let me give you a personal view. And Elkind is a special finance minister for the project inside Israel, north and south. That is somehow balance events in northern Israel and Negev, desert, and that's it. To bridge, to develop it, and all that stuff. So he the special independent financial minister, and he was a head of the before in previous years head of the committees and all that stuff. And then he explained what in his particular case he said, let me tell you my personal situation, what was. I was he said he was in the south of Israel, in the Negev, 6:30, finished the day. He had to drive to Jerusalem to the meeting of the inner cabinet, where it was decided a green light was given to the pilot attack and destroy military objects in Iran. So he said, suddenly my wife calls me and tells me, so you are not coming, I'm leaving tomorrow with my group to tour the Negev desert. There are rough tours, they're going to some places that normal people unable to walk through those paths. In any case, and he could not, he was in the jam. He couldn't tell her, listen, can you postpone? He couldn't say postpone, right? He couldn't tell her even, listen, can you tell them that you have a fever, you cannot go there, Because later on, if he had done though, he would be accused. Everybody was really exposed, nobody knew, but the wife of a minister, decided not to participate in the tour, kind of a land tour of the desert of Negev. So he couldn't say. And then she calls me him and says, you know, our son is suddenly they stopped their studies and interrupted, and a group of them are going to tour Negev as well. Once again, he couldn't tell, you know, the situation, tell him not to go. Of course, it's his son, and God knows what the rockets. We didn't know so there will be how many rockets and what damage and when will, how many of them will, let's say, pass the three levels of defense. But, but once again, so he with a very, very heavy situation, personally, he was really locked from giving them the truth. They didn't know what will happen. And he didn't give them, neither his wife or son, any advice not to go. Just to show you, sometimes leaks are usually political, a journalist. Here was life at stake, and he did not do it. The other final things which what was, yeah, actually we can end on this. I have plenty of information. I just will tell you that the next about the nafs that I was oil to do this, and this is the island. It's a tiny island in the bay which has. I forgot his name in my now, and where Iran delivers oil because it is has a very deep. It's up to 32 meters. It is about 30 meters. It's almost 100 feet deep, and big tankers can get loaded their oil and transfer it to Japan. 90% of Iranian oil is being sent to China. And China, thanks to this, they made money. They gave, and then what happened with the money that they earned because it was a lower price? They really developed military power, and now the issue of uh, threat to Taiwan is becomes alive and kicking. So, on the other hand, Iran also received plenty of money, which also gave them support to support Hezbollah, as we were talking before. Now, before, you see, uh, they expected Iranians that if there will be a trouble from Israel, so they will give one order to Hezbollah, one to Hamas, the other one to Houthis in Yemen, and this will be their line of defense. But as we know, all those three, including the Syria that fell through, disintegrated, exposed, and now Iran itself has no, so to say, the outside defense that they had, a military fence, so called, to contain Israel, disintegrated, and they were not ready. In a way, they always hoped that those three guys will begin the fire against Israel, and this will be the end of any attack against Iran. So, once again, the interesting thing is that there will be new development. At this point, the ceasefire ended actually, and it's not sure what to do. It continues. Another head of the, as you know, in Hamas was eliminated yesterday. The other also people in a high rank being neutralized in Iran. So the war is not over. The end of war is not over, but this is sufficient at this point to Israel. And it seems to me that President Trump said, if you will do anything, we are in a position to just jump into our planes and repeat the shows that we did that Saturday night. And on this high note, I bid all our viewers and listeners a nice week, a happy 4th of July,
Happy
and
4th of July, Ilya. Thank you for captivating talk today. As always, your interesting analysis, and hopefully we'll come back to Iran situation soon.
Okay.
We'll continue. Thank you very
Yes.
much.
Thank you. Bye bye.